You have 48 hours to remove that RV, or we file a lien on your home. That's what the HOA president said to me, standing in my own driveway holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. What she didn't know was that I'd already read the bylaws. Every single page, and she was about to find out just how wrong she was. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm 38, I fix HVAC systems for a living, and 3 years ago my wife Priya and I bought our first house in a quiet community called Millbrook Ridge. Two-story colonial, big oak tree out front, the kind of neighborhood where kids still ride bikes after dinner and everybody waves from their porch. We loved it instantly. It felt like the place we'd raise our daughter Maya, who was 4 at the time and obsessed with the mailbox shaped like a barn 2 doors down. We knew going in there was an HOA. Every house on the block had one. I actually didn't mind it at first: mowed lawns, matching mailboxes, a community pool that stayed clean, fine by me. I read through the covenants before we closed, like I read through everything because that's just who I am. Ask my wife. I read appliance manuals for fun. She calls it my one flaw. I call it a superpower, especially now. The HOA was run by a 5-person board and the president was a woman named Carol Whitfield. Carol had lived in Millbrook Ridge for 11 years, drove a white Lexus with a proud HOA president bumper sticker. I'm not joking, that's a real sticker she ordered online, and treated the community rulebook like her personal scripture. Most neighbors respected her. Some feared her. I just thought she was a little intense. I remember the first time I actually met Carol face to face. It was a Saturday morning. I was out front trimming the hedges, and she pulled up in that Lexus, rolled the window down about 4 inches, and told me my trash cans had been visible from the street for approximately 6 hours past the permitted window the previous Tuesday. She had a timestamp, an actual timestamp, like she'd been sitting somewhere with a notepad. I laughed it off at the time. Priya didn't laugh. She said, "That woman keeps a spreadsheet, Daniel. I've seen her at the mailboxes with a clipboard." I should have listened more carefully to that warning than I did. Everything was calm for 2 years. Then, last spring, my father-in-law passed his old 31-foot travel trailer down to us. Nothing fancy, a 2014 Forest River, tan and white, the kind you see at every campground in the country. We planned road trips with Maya. Priya cried a little when we hitched it up the first time because it had been her dad's and he'd passed away that January. This RV wasn't just aluminum and fiberglass to us. It meant something. I parked it in our own driveway off to the side, not blocking the sidewalk, not touching the street. I'd checked the bylaws first, of course I had, and travel trailers were allowed on a homeowner's property for up to 72 hours for loading, unloading, and cleaning, with written board approval for longer stays during active use. I planned to request that approval the very next week. I never got the chance. Carol beat me to it. 4 days after the trailer showed up in our driveway, a bright orange notice appeared taped to our front door. Violation notice: unauthorized recreational vehicle. Remove within 7 days or face a daily fine of $50, escalating to a lien after 30 days. No phone call, no knock, just a piece of paper taped over my doorbell like a parking ticket on a windshield. I called the HOA office that same afternoon. A woman named Denise answered, sounding tired before I even said a word. "Mr. Reyes, that violation was issued by Carol directly. You'll need to speak with her at the next board meeting, second Tuesday of the month." The second Tuesday was 11 days away. The fine clock apparently didn't wait for meetings, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I emailed Carol directly, polite, professional, attaching a photo of the trailer parked neatly against the side of our garage. I explained my father-in-law had just passed, that we intended to use the trailer for an upcoming trip in 3 weeks, and asked what paperwork she needed for the 72-hour extension the bylaws described. Her reply came 40 minutes later, 4 sentences. "The board does not grant exceptions for personal circumstances. Rules apply equally to all residents. You have 7 days as stated in the notice. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines per Section 9(4). I stood in my kitchen rereading that email 3 times, waiting to feel angry, and instead just feeling a strange, cold clarity settle over me. The same feeling I get right before I diagnose a stubborn HVAC unit that's been misdiagnosed by 2 other techs already. Something about her confidence bothered me more than the fine itself. She hadn't hedged, hadn't softened it, hadn't even acknowledged that my father-in-law had just died. She'd quoted a section number like it was a chess move she'd already won. Section 9(4). She'd quoted a section number at me like it settled the matter. I opened my own copy of the covenants that night, found Section 9(4), and read it twice just to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. It said nothing about a 7-day removal window. Nothing about $50 daily fines. Section 9. 4 was titled Temporary Recreational Vehicle Storage, and it explicitly permitted RVs, trailers, and boats to be parked in a homeowner's driveway for up to 14 days per calendar month, with no board approval required at all for stays under that limit. The 72-hour rule I remembered was for something else entirely: street parking, not driveway parking. Carol wasn't just enforcing a rule harshly, she was enforcing a rule that didn't exist. I sat at my kitchen table with Priya after Maya went to bed, the covenant booklet spread open between 2 mugs of coffee going cold, and I told her what I'd found. She didn't look surprised. Carol's been after the Delgados for their fence for 2 years, she said. And the Nuyens got fined for a basketball hoop that's been there since before Carol was even on the board. I hadn't heard those stories yet. I would hear a lot more of them over the next 3 weeks. I decided not to reply to Carol right away. Instead, I did something she clearly wasn't expecting. I went looking for the paper trail. The next morning I requested, in writing, a copy of the full, currently recorded declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions from the county recorder's office. Not the photocopied booklet the HOA had handed us at closing, but the actual document filed on public record. I also requested board meeting minutes going back 18 months, which under our state's HOA transparency statute, the association was legally required to provide within 10 business days of a written request. Denise from the HOA office called me back 2 days later, her voice noticeably different this time. Quieter. "Mr. Reyes, I just want to let you know the fine is still accruing at $50 a day starting tomorrow if the trailer isn't moved." "Understood," I told her. "I'll have a response for the board very soon." What I didn't say was that I'd already found something in those recorded documents that was going to change everything. A discrepancy between the version of the bylaws Carol kept quoting and the version legally on file at the county. And once I found it, I couldn't unsee it. The recorder's office emailed me the certified copy on a Thursday afternoon. I printed all 41 pages, sat down with a highlighter, and went line by line comparing it against the HOA's photocopied handbook. Most of it matched, but 3 sections didn't. Section 9(4) was one of them. The official county-recorded version, the one that actually had legal force, allowed 14 days of driveway RV storage per month with 0 pre-approval. The HOA's internal booklet, the one Carol handed to every new homeowner and the one she quoted in her violation notice, had been quietly rewritten at some point to say 72 hours and mandatory written approval. Someone had changed the wording in the booklet without ever amending the actual recorded declaration, which under state law requires a 2/3 vote of homeowners and a refiling with the county. That vote had never happened. There was no amendment on record, anywhere. I sat there staring at those 2 documents side by side for a long time. Carol wasn't misreading a gray area. She was enforcing a rule that had never legally existed, and she'd been doing it for who knows how long. I thought about just sending her the recorded document and letting that be that. But then I remembered the $50 fine already ticking, the Delgados fence, the Nuyens basketball hoop, and I decided a quiet email wasn't going to fix a pattern like this. This needed daylight. 2 days before the meeting, Carol upped the pressure again. A second notice appeared on our door, this one certified mail requiring a signature. Final notice, lien filing in progress. $650 in accrued fines, and a warning that continued noncompliance would result in a lien recorded against our property title, which could complicate any future sale or refinance. Priya read it standing in the kitchen and went very quiet, which for her is worse than yelling. Maya asked why Mommy looked sad, and I remember telling her it was nothing, even though my hands weren't quite steady when I filed that notice into the folder with everything else. I called Denise again that afternoon, calmer than I felt. "Has a lien actually been filed?" She hesitated. "Not yet." Carol wanted it ready to file the morning after the 7-day window closes. 7 days, my meeting was on day 11. I did the math out loud, and Denise, to her credit, went quiet on the other end of the line before saying, almost like a warning of her own, "You should probably bring documentation, Mr. Reyes." I already had 2 accordion folders full of it. But hearing the HOA's own office manager tell me to come prepared, told me everything I needed to know about how confident anyone actually was that Carol's numbers would hold up. The board meeting fell on a rainy Tuesday night in the community clubhouse, folding chairs arranged in uneven rows. A coffee urn nobody had refilled since probably 2019. Around 30 residents showed up, more than usual, because word travels fast in a neighborhood group chat when someone's getting fined over a family heirloom parked in their own driveway. Carol sat at the head table between 2 other board members. gavel in hand like she was presiding over a courtroom instead of a Tuesday night in a clubhouse that smelled like burnt coffee. When my item came up on the agenda, Ray's property violation appeal, she read the violation aloud in a flat, practiced voice, then looked up at me. "Mr. Rays, do you have anything to add?" I did. I stood, walked to the podium, and set down 2 stacks of paper. "I'd like to enter into the record the county-recorded declaration of covenants for Millbrook Ridge, obtained directly from the recorder's office 3 days ago, alongside the HOA handbook currently being distributed to homeowners." I held up both copies of Section 9.4 side by side so the room could see the difference in font and spacing even from the back row. The recorded version, the legally binding one, permits driveway RV storage for 14 days per month, no approval required. The handbook version, the one I was cited under, says 72 hours with mandatory board approval. These don't match. And under state statute, HOA rules can only be amended by a 2/3 homeowner vote followed by a refiling with the county recorder. I checked. No such vote and no such filing exists for this section, ever. The room went quiet in that specific way a room goes quiet when everyone realizes something just shifted. Carol's jaw tightened. "That handbook has been in use for years, Mr. Rays. It's what the community has always followed." "With respect," I said, "following an unrecorded change to the rules for years doesn't make it legal, it just means it went unchallenged for years." I turned to the room. "How many of you have been fined or told to move something based on a rule from that handbook?" 6 hands went up immediately, then 2 more slower like people were doing math in their heads about fines they'd already paid. Mrs. Delgado, 3 houses down, stood without waiting to be called on. "I paid $400 for a fence violation last year based on a setback rule in that same handbook. Are you telling me that was never legal either?" I hadn't checked her section. I told her honestly I didn't know yet, but that the discrepancy I'd found raised real questions about how many other sections had been quietly altered without a vote. A man near the back I didn't recognize called out, "What about the basketball hoop fine on Cypress Court?" "That's the same handbook, right?" A few people laughed, not unkindly, but the room had shifted from a Tuesday night meeting into something closer to a town hall. Carol tapped her gavel twice, asking for order, and for the first time all night her voice cracked just slightly at the edges. Carol's co-board members exchanged a look I wasn't supposed to catch. One of them, a retired accountant named Gary, cleared his throat. "Carol, did you personally revise the handbook language at some point?" There was a pause just long enough. "I updated it to be clearer," Carol finally said. "The intent was always 72 hours, everyone understood that." "The intent doesn't override the recorded declaration," I said, keeping my voice level even though my pulse was doing anything but. "I'm not here to relitigate every fine anyone's ever paid tonight. I'm here because I have a legal document parked in my driveway that never violated anything. A fine that's still accruing as we speak, and a violation notice built on a section that doesn't legally say what it's been claimed to say for what sounds like years." Gary looked at Carol, then at the room, then back at me. "Motion to immediately rescind the Rays violation and freeze all fines pending a full legal review of the handbook against the recorded declaration." Another board member seconded it before Carol could even respond. The vote passed 4-1, Carol was the one. The fines were reversed within the week, not just mine, but a review process opened for every violation issued under those 3 mismatched sections going back 2 years. Mrs. Delgado got her $400 back, with interest the board voted on separately. The Nuyens basketball hoop violation, tied to a similarly altered clause, was dropped entirely. Carol didn't resign that night. She tried to hang on for another few weeks, sending increasingly clipped emails about protecting community standards, but momentum had already turned. At a special session a month later, homeowners voted her off the board entirely, replacing her with Gary as interim president. I heard she still drives that Lexus around the neighborhood, bumper sticker and all, though I like to think it stings a little differently now. Under Gary, one of the first things the board did was hire an actual attorney to reconcile every page of the handbook against the county-recorded declaration, line by line, and republish a corrected version to every homeowner with the discrepancies flagged in red. 14 sections had drifted from the recorded original over the years, not just the 3 I'd caught. Some were minor, a few weren't. The Patels, 2 streets over, got back nearly $900 in fines tied to a landscaping clause that had quietly grown 3 times stricter than what was ever legally on file. Nobody had checked because nobody thought to. Why would you? You trust the people handing you the rulebook. My RV still sits in the driveway sometimes, exactly where it's legally allowed to. Last month we finally took that trip Priya's father would have loved, 3 weeks, 6 states, Maya asleep against the window somewhere in Tennessee with a stuffed dinosaur clutched to her chest. Every time I hitch that trailer up, I think about how close I came to just moving it that first week to avoid a headache, and how differently this whole thing would have gone if I had. Here's what I took away from all of it. HOAs have real power, and some people on those boards genuinely believe the rulebook in their hand is the whole truth. But the rulebook in their hand isn't always the rulebook that's actually legal. If something feels off, if a fine feels aggressive, if a section gets quoted at you like a threat, go get the real document, the one on file at the county. It costs almost nothing, it takes a few days, and it might be the only thing standing between you and losing money over a rule that was never real to begin with. If this story felt satisfying to you, it's probably because you've dealt with your own version of Carol at some point, a landlord, a boss, a board, someone who counted on you never checking the fine print. Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, the kind where somebody quiet does their homework and wins, stick around. There's a lot more where this came from.